here today basically to talk about the peace process, to update people on where things are at the moment. And first of all, to express my deep thanks and appreciation to every one of you who have taken time out to come to this event this afternoon. I'm really pleased and delighted to be here. We've come on a very long journey, a journey of huge division, hatred, conflict and bitterness, to one of an end of war, an end of conflict and peace. And that is something that I regard as an amazing accomplishment. As someone who was a very young person looking at the way in which the north of Ireland was right up there on the news alongside the situation in South Africa and the situation in the Middle East. These were all conflicts that many people thought would never find a resolution. And of course, when you look at what happened in South Africa, and the tremendous leadership of people like Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, and the resolution of that conflict, that certainly was an inspiration in terms of having an effect on how we would resolve our conflict, because I was very privileged to be part of in fact I led the Sinn Féin delegation in 1997, which travelled to South Africa at the invitation of President Mandela, along with all of the other parties, pro-British, Unionist and Irish Republican and Nationalist, to have a conversation about how we could move our peace process forward. That was 1997. 10 years later, I went into government alongside Ian Paisley, representing the largest pro-British, pro-Unionist political party in the north of Ireland. And people still look at amazement at the photographs of Ian Paisley and myself together. And sadly, Ian Paisley died recently, and I will be attending his memorial service next Sunday at the Ulster Hall in Belfast. But I suppose nothing epitomises the journey that we have all come on the side of Phil and I agreeing on the basis of equality to go into government together and to share the office of First and Deputy First Minister. And that was a remarkable experience, from being bitter political opponents for many, many decades. When we found ourselves being able to agree a way forward politically, go into government together, we surprised not just ourselves, but the whole world, in that we were able to develop not just a positive and constructive working relationship, but actually to being able to develop a friendship which lasted until the day he died. So, in anybody's book, that was a remarkable achievement. And these things are only possible because in any conflict situation, there is absolutely no hope whatsoever of resolving conflict unless there is a desire among all the people associated with that conflict to engage in a meaningful process of dialogue and negotiation for the purposes of finding an agreement. And that's what we did. It started with the IRA ceasefire in 1994, through to the concluding of the Good Friday Agreement in April 1998, through to the attempt to get a very inclusive government in the north, because Reverend Paisley's party stayed effectively outside of the inclusive nature of that government for a number of years, but eventually that also came to pass in 2007 as a result of a further agreement we made at St Andrews in Scotland. And over the course of the last 7 years, I have been in government with as an Irish Republican, someone who believes in Irish reunification, and believes that can only now be achieved by purely peaceful and democratic means. I've been in government with people who are diametrically politically opposed to me in terms of political aspirations. Pro-British Unionists, pro-British loyalists. But what we all have in common are the agreements that we have made. And the agreements that we have made are international agreements. The Good Friday Agreement, which has been signed up to by both the Irish and the British government and all of the political parties, with the exceptions of the Democratic Unionist Party. The St Andrews Agreement brought them on board. So the architecture of what we agreed on Good Friday is still the architecture that we are in stewardship of today. And I was part of a previous administration. I was Minister of Education during a period of 3 years whenever the institutions collapsed on 2 or 3 occasions. I've been in government now with Peter Robinson for the last 6 years in the office of First and Deputy First Minister, and the institutions haven't collapsed once. That's also an amazing achievement. And I know better than most of the eyes of the world have looked at what we did and how we did it. And I know that many other conflict situations sought to learn from our experiences. We know that because we have sent our negotiators from all sections of our political establishment to far-flung conflicts in places like the Philippines. I've been to Colombia myself recently. I've been to the Basque Country recently. I've been to Sri Lanka. I was part of a group of negotiators alongside Cyril Ramaphosa and Rolf Meyer, who were both key negotiators for F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela, who engaged with the warring factions from Iraq on 2 occasions in Finland, in a forest in Finland. And that culminated then in a visit to Baghdad for what was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, to see how highly militarised that situation was. So we see all of these conflicts throughout the world, and people coming to our shores seeking to learn from our experiences, and it's quite obvious that the peace process in Ireland is held up as a beacon of hope as to how conflict can be resolved. And that's no mean achievement. And it's something that we, I think, as a community, and I am very inclusive about this, the European community, the world community, cannot afford to lose. In almost every speech in a foreign place that he makes, President Clinton refers to the Irish peace process and to how that is a beacon of hope and how it can inspire people to find ways to resolve conflicts that have led to the deaths of many hundreds of thousands of people throughout the world. So I think what we've been involved in is something to be very, very proud of. We don't claim a credit for ourselves within Sinn Féin. That credit must go to everybody, to British and Irish politicians, to the Blair government, to the contributions made by other governments, to the Irish government and their contribution, to the US administration for the encouragement and interest that they took, and to unionist political leaders, to pro-nationalist Republican political leaders. It was a very, at the end of the day, inclusive process which delivered for everybody. So everybody deserves credit. Not one individual or group of individuals. Everybody deserves credit, because in contributing to that peace process, there was a very clear recognition by everybody that unless we got to grips with the causes of the conflict and brought political solutions to bear, then we were condemning future generations to more strife, more conflict, more violence and death. And I would contend that if you have any sense of yourself at all as a politician, whether it be at the European Union or in Ireland or Colombia or in the Philippines, then your primary political objective has to be about resolving conflict, bringing an end to death and destruction, and putting in place political solutions. And that's what we have done, and it has been heartwarming to be part of that process. Now, in the course of recent times, I think a certain complacency has crept in. I think some of the governments have been guilty, for want of a better word, of complacency in relation to the situation in the north of Ireland. over the course of the last 2 years has been particularly difficult. And it's incredible that the difficulties that have created huge problems for us within the peace process are issues like how we deal with the past, how we deal with the issue of contentious parades, and how we deal with the whole issue of allegiance, things like flags and symbols and identity. And over the last 2 years, these issues have actually overshadowed a tremendous amount of good work that has been done in trying to, as we proclaimed whenever we put our programme for government together in 2011, place developing our economy front and centre of our programme for government. And that meant trying to be involved in a fight back against a very cruel word recession. It meant trying to support our local entrepreneurs who have made such a tremendous contribution towards keeping people in employment, people who are involved in manufacturing in very, very difficult circumstances. But it also meant trying to attract foreign direct investment. And the first foreign visit that Ian Paisley and myself made was to the United States in December 2007. When we began the process of trying to attract more foreign direct investment from the United States to our shores. We were tremendously helped by the different administrations within the peace process, from the Clinton administration right through. At that time, George Bush was President of the United States. We met him in the Oval Office, Ian Paisley and myself. That sent a very powerful message to Irish America and to potential investors that the North of Ireland was open for business and that something fundamental had changed for the good. And of course, whenever Ian Paisley left office, he was replaced by Peter Robinson, who has been working with me as the First Minister for the last 6 years. And we continued with that work in the United States, and as a result of our efforts, we've managed within a 3-4 year period to bring more foreign direct investment to our shores than at any other time in the history of the state. But yet, all of that good work is overshadowed by events on the streets. And these are the issues that we have to get to grips with. 2 days from now, the governments have announced that important talks will take place in Belfast at the Parliament buildings. We in Sinn Féin will certainly be there. We will be there with a very positive and constructive spirit. Over the last 18 months, we've had other attempts to try and resolve these issues, to find solutions to these vexed issues. Peter Robinson and myself invited Dr. Richard Haas, highly respected US diplomat, who was accompanied by Professor Megan O'Sullivan, who both spent a considerable amount of time in speaking with all of the parties and trying to find solutions to these huge problems. And that culminated in them putting forward their proposals on the past, parades, and the whole issue of flag symbols and identity. We in Sinn Féin, who had our own positions going into those talks, compromised on those 3 issues, and in order to find a way forward, agreed that we would work with the proposals that had been made by Richard Haas and by Megan O'Sullivan. Unfortunately, that only found favour with the SDLP who came on board, the Alliance Party who came on board to support the proposal, but the pro-British Unionist parties felt that they were unable to support the proposal. So we didn't find a solution. Another attempt was made several months later when all of the parties agreed to try another effort, but that failed also. So that does create political instability. It's a political instability that needs to be removed from the equation. And I think that we have to be very determined in our efforts over the course of the next number of weeks. And I think the window of opportunity really only exists probably to the beginning of December to find a way forward. We desperately need to find that way forward, because there is a very serious danger that all of the political progress that we have made in the course of recent years will be undermined by failure in these talks. And we at Sinn Féin are very determined not to be associated with a failed talks process, given that we were so much involved with very successful talks processes, both at Castlebuilders when we recorded the Good Friday Agreement in Scotland at St Andrews, and in the context of the Hillsborough negotiations, which was a very tricky negotiation to transfer policing powers from London to our administration in Belfast. The other scenario that we will deal with in these talks is a very severe budgetary situation which exists. And I say that in the context of, again, expressing my very deep thanks and appreciation to the European Union for the tremendous support that we have received financially from the European Union for various peace programmes, for the NEADER programme and for the Interreg programme. The EU has played an invaluable role in supporting a community fighting its way out of conflict and towards peace and prosperity, and that has to be appreciated. One of the agreements that we failed to bring to a successful conclusion, which deeply disappointed me, was the fact that in our programme for government in 2011, we agreed that we would construct a peace building and conflict resolution centre on the site of the Longcash prison. That became a casualty of the instability of the last couple of years. The flags protest in Belfast, which brought large numbers of extreme loyalists onto the streets. Not all extreme loyalists, but I think that extreme loyalism in the shape of elements of the Orange Order and the UVF were clearly behind the protests, which resulted in large numbers of police officers being injured. It was a very depressing situation indeed. So the union's political leaders felt that they could not go forward with the Peace Building Conflict Resolution Centre. We have been granted something like €18 million by the European Union to construct that on a site that was an iconic site, one of the great sites in Europe with fantastic potential for employing anything up to 5,000 to 6,000 people. So you can see how instability on the streets can affect even commitments that we have agreed in the context of the programme for government. The other situation we're dealing with is that since the Conservative government linked up with the Liberal Democrats in England under the coalition government, the reality is, and on this Peter Robinson and I are both agreed, the block grant that we are funded from, even though we have control over a wide range of issues from education to agriculture, further higher education, and the environment, etc., policemen and so forth. The budget still comes from Westminster. And there has been no uplift in that budget whatsoever over the course of the last 4 years, which means through inflation and rising costs, the impact is very severe on departments who are trying to find a way forward. And then on top of that, we have these austerity measures, the cuts to social welfare, which also will impact very detrimentally on some of the most marginalised, disadvantaged and disabled within our society. And I would contend that as a society in areas of conflict, these are the sort of pressures that our administration can do without. So the whole issue of social welfare, the whole issue of the block grant and budget matters, will also form an important part of these talks over the course of the next number of weeks. So it's important to come here to give our perspective on where things sit at the moment, given the massive investment that the European Union has made in our part of the world. So, difficulty about giving the politician the microphone is he can talk, or she can talk forever. I don't intend to do that because I think it'll be much more productive if we can allow you in the audience an opportunity to ask whatever question that you like. I will answer the easy ones, and I'll get Martina to answer. So thank you very much indeed for coming.